Hi viewers, welcome back to the channel, Beautiful Awakening with Shantia. This channel is dedicated to your transformation and your alignment. So welcome back to the Infinitely Sensitive series. I created this series because I am a sensitive person, and if there's anything that has brought me to the point where I'm at now, where I'm able to kind of cope in a healthy way and live life that feels in flow with my nature, it's been observing and learning different ways to manage my sensitivity out here in the world. Because my story is that I was most definitely an escapist. I didn't want to deal with the reality of life, yet at the same time, I felt the pressure too. Because, you have to admit to yourself if you're a human, we're here to have a human experience. So we can't just escape from the responsibilities of life. We have to find a way to work with it. So I've learned how to work with my sensitivity to my benefit. Before I kind of delve into this discussion further, I just want to let you guys know they are popping fireworks near where I live. So it is going off. There's a whole show happening, I guess. 4th of July isn't yet, but people are already excited about it. So let them have their fun. So hopefully it won't disrupt the video too much, which is funny because this is an episode for sensitive people. Okay, so at the end of this video, go ahead and stay with me. We're going to do a little bit of a meditation with my singing bowl here. I'm just going to ding it for you guys, and you can see if you want to do that. And I'm also going to pull some tarot cards on this channel and on my on my channel in general. I am dedicated to, I'm very open-minded, and I love playing with tarot, delving into astrology, and a lot of the different occult sciences. So if you want to stay for that, then I would love for you to do that. Okay, so in today's episode, I wanted to talk about something which occurred to me the other day, and it really struck me because it's been a while since I felt this energy, and I felt a calling to talk about it. So sometimes our stories really create, the stories that we tell ourselves really create a rift in how we feel and how we exude, how we live our lives. Like, if you create a story in your mind, you go out in the world, if you create a story in your mind about who you are, that shapes the perception of how you feel about yourself and how you think people feel about you. And it was just very interesting because sometimes our attachment to our stories, which, you have a story, we all have a story, we came from this. If I didn't know my story, I wouldn't be able to relate to you, right? But it's the attachment to our stories that causes issues. I learned to detach from my story, from the victim mentality, from feeling sorry for myself, from feeling bad about my life. And that's where I was able to build, through self-awareness, I was able to build the confidence, build the patience, build the focus and the concentration and the calmness that I so desired and seeked. So desired to seek for myself. Okay, so the other day I was just having a conversation with someone, and they approached me and they said they felt a certain way. They had a story that was going on in their head. And I was so confused because I was like, I they were very attached to this story they were telling in their head, and I was living a totally different experience. So it caught me off guard. And then on top of that, as soon as they told me that, I knew what the mission was because I had dealt with this pattern in people before. When someone comes into your space and they're very upset because they're attached to a story, or they're attached to how they perceived you to make them feel. My responsibility, Abraham Hicks talks about it all the time, is to just align with my inner being. That's your only job. So it's either you have kind of two options, right? You either align with your being or you attach to the story. And when you attach to the story, it starts to create all this suffering for you. Because now that I'm attached to the story, I have to become, usually what's a part of a story, right? You have a hero or a victim, which, being a hero might not sound too bad, but being the victim in the story doesn't sound very great. And most people, when they create stories, it's that things are happening to me. But that's why I always say, if you're going to create a story, make it a story that you really love. So change your story. Change your story so you're the hero. Uh, so our attachment to our stories really impact how we interact with other people. I realized that this person was attached to a certain perception, but because I had been working on detaching, because I had, had this relationship with this person, because I had been working on detaching for so long to that story I had to that person, and I was creating a new story, I was living a totally different experience with them. While, in their minds, we're having conflict, in my mind, everything's great. And that's just the way life is. It's like we're always kind of in a different place. And this is always the challenging part of relationships. And this is why we communicate. But I'm all about effective communication. So if you're experiencing some kind of conflict, whether this is with someone else or you're having, this conflict by yourself, just ask yourself, what is valuable about this story that I keep telling? And is it for my highest good? If I hold on to this story, is it helping me to feel good about this experience? Or is it hindering me? Is it helping or is it hindering? And I felt like in most cases, the story was hindering me. It was hindering me. So what did I do? I took my story, I rewrote it. I wrote a different story, ripped up the pages, threw it out in the trash because the past is the past. It's always the past. I, for years, would tell myself a story. When I was going through my struggles and my turmoil, my storms, I would constantly tell myself the same story. And every time I told myself that story, I was always the victim of that story. Things are happening to me, nobody understands me. And the thing is, we're born into circumstances. They're not necessarily fair, right? Because everything is born, we're born into experiences for us to wake up. We're born into experiences for us to learn. So, no, we're not going to be given an easy route. Nobody is. No one's given the easy route. You have to find a way to cope. You have to build up the coping mechanism, the tools to handle stresses in life because we don't have a choice. It's either you handle it or you can't be here anymore. I knew that if I didn't know how to handle as a sensitive person being here in this world and learn how to be very disciplined with my emotions, I wasn't going to be able to survive. Like, that's the hard truth. I wasn't going to be able to survive because I was going to start to build up. The thoughts were going to become so intense. The heartache was going to become so intense that I wouldn't be able to breathe here. So I had to survive, I had to detach from the story. The way that I learned how to detach from my story, I talk about Eckhart Tolle all the time, being present in your body. That's one of them. Learning how to just be present in your body and just being. There's no rush to go anywhere, do anything, be somebody. It's just being. It's effortless. It has no requirements. You don't have to be a certain status. You don't have to be in a specific place in life. You can be at any point in time, wherever you are. The other one is changing the story. So yes, we create stories in our head. And I'm like, if you're going to create a story, create a good one. Create a good one. Create one that you really enjoy. So look at your story journal, write it down, right? This is the challenges. Write a different story on the other side. What you're desiring for yourself. But I would also say do it in a way where you're creating that space for yourself. So I know sometimes you want to be like, I want to be born into another family. We can't change that. Let's not try to do the impossible. Let's work from a place of least resistance and instead say, okay, maybe I'm going to manifest something different for myself. So after you've changed your story, the next thing or another way for you to be able to detach further, focus on building yourself in the present. So wherever you're at, make a list of things that you want to work on. This is kind of why I became really obsessed with self-improvement, because I didn't like my story. I didn't really like how I felt about myself. I wanted to feel a different way. And so I was like, okay, what do I need to do to get into this state where I've achieved these things? In order for us to manifest new experiences, you have to become the reciprocal to that thing. So you don't have to become a genius overnight in order for you to manifest your desires, but you have to align with it energetically, internally. You can do that through affirmations, saying things. I bought this box of affirmation cards, the legendary affirmation cards. I love these. These are fun. But I found that writing my own affirmations is what I preferred because they were my words. They meant more to me. I do a gratitude prayer every morning after I do my meditation. I just thank the universe for everything. I say thank you for all of my blessings. I'm so fortunate. I'm so lucky. Before it was just, oh, thank you. I'm alive. And that's just where you start, right? You start at where you're at. If you have to just be like, well, I'm happy to, or I'm feeling good that I woke up today. I got out of bed today. Then that's where you're at. And then you can move even further along to like bigger desires as you get more comfortable with doing that. But the number one thing, really, in order for you to detach from stories, is just being present in your body. Because, when this person came up to me and they were telling me their story, I just detached. And part of me was like, should I investigate further? I'm like, I don't know why, but I just feel like this is a test, and two, unnecessary. But I was like, okay, let me have a conversation with them. And let me tell them, okay, what can I do for you so that you feel like you're receiving the thing that you perceive I'm not giving you? Like, what do I need to do? And they just walked away because they weren't interested in the resolution or the solution. They weren't interested in resolving it. They were only interested in the conflict and the drama. Conflict and drama cycle over and over again. This is what happens when we attach to our stories. We're not interested in solutions and resolving our problems. We're just interested in the conflict and the drama because that's all we can keep repeating. We're repeating the trauma within us. And the trauma is in the body. This is why it's so important to be in the body. Because the trauma is in the body. You need to heal the body by being present in the body. You focus your attention on the emotion. When you're not present with your emotions, when you don't give your emotions enough acknowledgement, they create stories that don't exist. Not only it's more importantly that they don't really matter until you give them the energy or the power to matter. And that's the one biggest lie that people have been told, is that they don't have power. You have all the power you need within you. That's authentic power. Anything external isn't authentic power. Those are just exercise temporary displays of the illusion of power. People who are powerful don't go displaying their power. It's a felt experience. So it's just something to contemplate. I don't think I had necessarily a main focus for how do we do this, but it's just something to think about. Are you letting your stories destroy your relationships? Are you letting your stories create drama and wreak havoc in your life? What are the stories are you telling yourself? What stories are playing on repeat in your mind? Are these stories helping you or are they hindering you? If it's hindering you, write another story. Because maybe you can't help but make up a story. But of course, the highest gurus, the highest masters, ascendant and masters and teachers, they detach from all stories. They're just present, period. But most of us are just like normal, okay? Most of us are just like, okay, we have stories, we have attachments to them, and that's fine too. And I always say life is about living on a spectrum. I have moments where I'm just present. I don't care about my story. I have moments where I do care about my story. And I have moments where I'm very detached. And I'm like, I fluctuate in and out of attaching to stories and detaching. But I always want to bring awareness to the stories I attach myself to. Because I don't want my attachment to a certain story, to impact and inflict and color a relationship that could be thriving. I don't want to get it in the way of a story thriving. And, even as I've taken so much time and obsessed over building awareness for myself, being aware of how I am and how I'm perceiving people, I still create stories all the time. And I still have to ask myself, Am I creating a story about this person? Am I getting energetically in the way of this? Am I repeating a story in my head, or am I actually being present with this person? Because part of, the issue, and part of why I think I attracted that experience to me, was because there is a little bit of an attachment to the story. It's karmic. And I'm like, I think it's gonna take me some time to resolve this because it's so deep that it's gonna take me, it feels like it's gonna take some uncovering, and it's gonna take years. But I'm okay with where I'm at right now with it, and bringing the amount of awareness that I can to it. So I ask you, consider, how can you bring some awareness to the stories around yourself and around how other people perceive you, and specifically around those relationships that you feel conflicted in, or just any relationship in general? Because everything's for our highest good, and everything is for our growth, so that we can learn and we can evolve and do better, or just be present and enjoy life. And I'm like, as soon as after that person left, I was fine. I was just like, oh, okay. Now I'll think about it later. I put it aside because I'm like, I honestly, I was outside. I was enjoying the sun, and I didn't want to, and I was focusing on something else, and I was so detached at the moment. And I'm like, okay, I'll process this later. It is important to process things, I would say, sooner than later, but I do set things aside. Like, I do kind of compartmentalize when there's conflict. I'm like, I set it aside, because if in that moment I start thinking about it, and let's say you're emotional in that moment, I might start feeding more into the story. So I detach from it, and I say, okay, I'll come back to it when I calm down. And that's kind of how everything is. Like, it's so interesting. Like, even the stories, I have to set things aside in my mind and with my emotions, because I'm like, if I start thinking about this right now, I might start getting really emotional and attaching a story and creating more conflict and drama, because I have this karmic thing with this person, and I'm trying to figure it out. We're all trying to figure it out. But that's why we're here on this channel, is to work through this. And I'm just telling you, like, what is your attachment to the stories? I've learned to create stories, new stories, and better stories. And I really have a beautiful story around this person too. But there's also the other story, and I know it's there. And it's not hidden or anything. I feel the energy of it. So I'm not surprised that this person came up to me and shared that. It was out of the blue, but I was just, the intensity of it, I was surprised by the intensity of it. But I no longer beat myself up about wondering, why do things happen? Why me? Da da da. It's just, things come back in patterns and cycles for us to learn. And I'm like, that's perfectly fine. And I'm like, oh, if I didn't learn, I didn't learn. You know, I used to beat myself up like crazy. Why didn't I learn? Why is this still happening? And it's just, how present are you? Part of the lesson it felt in that moment was something told me to detach right away and not get emotional. Another part of me, a quieter part, but a much more powerful part of me, called for my fingers, called for me to pay attention to what was the subtlety of what was going on there. Why did that happen? What was the energetic? What was going on? Because I'm like, to some degree, I'm like, I was attached to some kind of story that was at play there too. Sometimes I'll share this really quick, and then I'm gonna go ahead and ding the singing bowl and pull a tarot card, and we will end this video. But there will be times where I think of conflicting thoughts repeatedly around someone, and it keeps winding around, keeps going in my head, and it goes away, and then it comes back. And I'm literally, my interactions with that person are fine. They're perfectly fine. But in my head, I can feel these thoughts building and the intensity of it, and I can feel it in my body. And then weeks later, something will just happen with that person where we will, like, have a conflict. And I'm like, it's because I was, like, recharging energy around this issue, around this story. I kept telling my head about this person. So I feel like that's the biggest lesson here for me to learn, is like, there's still a subtle story that was at play, and I'm still attached to it. And I need to free myself of it and detach myself of it, because this person will, I don't think they would have have not nearly been as upset if I wasn't also attached to the story. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull a tarot card really quick for advice. Right. So we're gonna ask my guides for advice for the collective who's watching this lovely video. Is our attachment to our stories ruining our relationships or creating havoc in our lives or impacting us in a way that isn't healthy? What is the advice for the collective guides? Don't want to drop this on the floor. And then after this, I'm going to do a pick a card reading because they're so fun for my viewers, y'all. Okay. Yay, we got one. Oh my gosh. It's the Hermit. My card. My card. Hermit, that's me. Okay, so the lesson here is to look within you. Look inside of yourself. You have all the answers you seek. If you ever feel conflicted around your relationships and you're trying to heal yourself, you already know the answer to what you seek. It's in you. So take a moment, maybe set aside, just like I had to, sit in silence and contemplate. Contemplate what needs to be done here. How can I free myself of this angst? Your light is within you. Your light is within you. Okay, so we will go ahead and okay, now we'll do the singing bowl. Enjoy this meditation, and thank you so much for enjoying this conversation with me. If you are interested in coaching and working on one-on-one coaching with me, I do life coaching, helping people with their transformation and alignment and their healing. Healing, 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 healing. I'm always doing my healing. And if you feel like you are needing some assistance in your healing journey, I would be more than happy to be a part of that with you. It's so funny. I hear the bell, but this microphone, I don't know if it necessarily captures all of the resonance of it. Okay. Thank you guys for joining me. I will see you next time on another episode. And I wasn't expecting to be back for this episode so soon, but I was inspired to talk about this.